Can you believe that this creature, which looks like a rat, is actually a human from 1,000 years in the future? Even though he insists he is human, he is only mocked in the presence of the new humans. 1,000 years ago, in 2011, some humans suddenly awakened to superpowers. With the help of technology, the number of people with powers reached 0.3% of the global population. It was these people who changed the whole world. Fast forward a millennium, the world has returned to a pastoral age, and now, all humans possess superpowers. At the start of our story, a girl named Saki wakes up in the middle of the night to find objects in her home flying around chaotically. However, her mother is overjoyed when she enters, because Saki has awakened her spirit blessing and officially become an adult, thus escaping a fate of disappearance. She is sent to the Serene Temple, where the chief priest gives her psychological suggestions, seals Saki's evil power through a Homa ritual, and grants her the pure power of Mantora. After these procedures, Saki is finally able to advance to the complete person school, where her friends have long been waiting for her. Satoru jokes that Saki took too long to mature. Suddenly, Saki finds herself at the bottom of the class. What about the others? There's a moment of silence and the topic is changed. Saki feels like they are like creatures corralled on a farm, enslaved and altered, but her friends completely fail to understand what she's saying. However, they soon make up during art class, because the school requires class-based team cooperation. They use their powers to draw on sketchbooks, passing them from one to another. Reiko, who is last in line, fails to complete her drawing. Later, in a game of stacking cards with powers, Reiko fails again. Satoru thinks Reiko is holding them back. After school, he deliberately leaves Reiko out, saying he doesn't want her to develop an inferiority complex, unaware that Reiko disappears that day. On the way home, Saki hears that students who don't graduate from Walkway Garden vanish, a claim Satoru agrees might be true. The teacher opens the school courtyard, revealing countless graves, but obviously, such outrageous claims are not believed. Shun also speaks up. Having been into the school building, he saw only some old warehouses on the courtyard grounds. The girls are all frightened by strange rumors. Satoru mentions the cat trick again. Someone saw a giant cat's shadow on a window. The cat trick enters the school to devour children without powers. Suddenly, Saki collapses, having indeed seen the cat trick before awakening her power. She is terrified. Her mother comforts her, saying it's just a legend, but Saki overhears her parents' conversation, her mother roaring about not wanting to lose another child. Powerless, Saki has already seen the cat trick. Her parents must be hiding something. A month after Reiko's disappearance, the school holds a ball-pushing game as scheduled. On the surface, it seems only a test of control over power, but secretly, it still harbors a mechanism of elimination. The losers will face the fate of disappearance, but the children, still naive, eagerly plan for the game. The day quickly arrives. The rule is to control clay figures to push the ball and defend, aiming to push the ball into the opponent's hole. Reiko cannot directly use power to destroy the opponent's statues. However, in the final round, the opponent cheats, and the protagonist group loses the match. What they don't know is that the cheating student has already been targeted by the teacher's cat trick, and after being stamped as disqualified, completely disappears. Afterwards, they embarked on the long-awaited camping trip. The students had to paddle canoes upstream along the river and survive in the wilderness for 7 days. Unbeknownst to them, this was still a screening process from acceptance to disappearance. On the way home from school, the main group encountered the Bike Nazumi. Saki remembered her father's words from her childhood. The Bake Nazumi are duplicitous creatures, utterly obedient to those with power, and children without the curse would face unknown dangers. Watching the Bake Nazumi diligently cleaning the river, Kato's warning instilled a sense of fear towards them. Suddenly, a Bake Nazumi in front of Mirin slipped and fell into the river. Everyone exclaimed in shock but hesitated to help. Saki stepped forward, despite everyone advising her not to interfere. Seeing Saki's urgency, Shun enlightened her. Saki used her power to rescue the Bake Nazumi. They all agreed that this incident must remain hidden from the school. The rescued Bake Nazumi prostrated themselves and expressed their gratitude. Listening to the few words the Bake Nazumi knew, everyone was not worried about them revealing secrets, as they could not understand their language. Observing the symbols on the Bake Nazumi's forehead, the respected Shun explained that these were symbols distinguishing the Bake Nazumi tribes. Afterwards, the group parted ways. In this world, does no one care about the children who disappear? That day, the group embarked on several days of wilderness training. The wilderness was fraught with dangers, such as nest-building snakebirds, whose eggs exploded like bombs upon impact. They collected some just in case. Soon, they faced their first night. Everyone discussed recent sightings of the balloon dog, a creature roughly the size of a dog, entirely black, which inflates like a pufferfish when threatened and then explodes. Everyone doubted Satoru's logic. If it kills itself, what's the point in scaring off enemies? It should have been extinct long ago, right? Satoru then changed the subject. The people who went to Mount Tsukuba not only saw the balloon dog, but also encountered the demonic false Minoshiro. Those who see a Minoshiro soon die. Unexpectedly, Shun decided that this camping trip's theme would be to study the demonic Minoshiro and other rare creatures. Satoru became fearful as he heard that powers do not affect Minoshiro. Nevertheless, the group decided to explore. Later in a draw, Satoru stayed to watch over Mamoru's camp, while the other four went on a night boat trip. Shun used his power to calm the water, reflecting a beautiful starry sky, reminding Saki of something. Her parents, being librarians, had given her substantial knowledge. Minoshiro and many other species had appeared only in the last few centuries, which is impossible according to evolutionary theory. The only possibility was human influence. The next day, after a brief preparation, they continued their journey, defying the teacher's instructions to venture deep into the forest. They indeed encountered the demonic Minoshiro. Its light controlled everyone except for Saki, who wore sunglasses and was not hypnotized. Everyone was terrified. Then Shun said that at that moment, they were paralyzed and could not use their powers. They wanted to leave, but Saki decided to capture the Minoshiro. They caught 2 large crabs and tied them up to lead the way like dogs. Unexpectedly, the crabs rushed into a cave and actually caught the Minoshiro. With Saki's glasses allowing them to act, everyone was again hallucinated by Minoshiro's light. Saki started to attack Minoshiro to save everyone, only to hear a human voice warning her to immediately stop her destructive actions. But under Saki's coercion, the Minoshiro ceased its luminescence, and everyone regained their senses in the next moment. However, the words spoken by the Minoshiro baffled everyone. It claimed to be a mobile library because paper-based information had long since decayed or been destroyed during wars. All information was stored within the Minoshiro's holographic memory device and was accessible at any time. Curious, Saki couldn't wait to resolve the doubts in her mind. The Minoshiro explained that Aki was actually a mental illness from a past civilization that involved indiscriminate killing, and yokai were also beings that appeared in past civilizations. What followed in the Minoshiro's recounting of history made the children tremble with fear. 1,000 years ago, people first discovered individuals with psychic abilities. Initially, these individuals posed no threat to the world until the emergence of a Japanese boy, A, who became a catalyst for global upheaval. The boy discovered he could unlock any door, which led him down a path of crime, brutally murdering 17 young girls. After boy A was arrested, it incited more psychics to commit evil, turning into terrorists who caused mass casualties in attempts to overthrow politics and human rights and dominate ordinary people. From there, the world plunged into an unprecedented era of warfare. However, the war did not reduce the number of those with powers. Instead, it drastically decreased the population of ordinary people to just 2% of its original number, as everyone's power was comparable to nuclear weapons. This led to a dark age that lasted over 500 years. Human society was forced into 4 irreconcilable groups. The first was the power-holding slave dynasties that ruled over ordinary people. The second type consisted of powerless hunters who fled the slave dynasties and hid in the deep mountains. The third were raiders who constantly used their psychic abilities to kill, and the last were cultural organizations that barely managed to inherit scientific technology. The children were terrified. The slave dynasty was the most significant part throughout the Dark Age. Japan had seen 4 slave dynasties, but Minoshiro's database contained records only of the most powerful, the Holy Sakura dynasty, which lasted 570 years and produced 794 kings. Each emperor was more brutal than the last. Successors, upon awakening their psychic abilities, would instantly kill the reigning emperor to usurp the throne. The 79th emperor was especially inhumane. He enjoyed killing people in his dreams. During his reign, the population halved, and corpses were everywhere, with the stench of death reaching miles away. Satoru was terrified, but Shun was still eager to learn more about the past. With tyranny, there naturally came resistance. The hunting tribes, at the cost of countless lives, overthrew the slave dynasty. The scientific civilization group, which had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped forward and ended the era of slavery altogether. Shun then posed a question. Logically speaking, weren't they descendants of the scientific group? Then why, each walking like a nuclear bomb, had no terrifying wars ensued again? Minoshiro once again provided an answer. Psychic abilities possess infinite possibilities. Thus, they developed some restrictive measures. The first proposed was education, followed by psychological methods. By combining these two approaches, they could identify and eliminate problem children 100%. Later, the study of animal behavior became mainstream. People have found that because the bonobo society is full of love, conflicts among them are rare. Regardless of age, sex, or gender, they relieved stress through love. Even so, everyone was still not at ease because even just one person losing control of their power could lead to the destruction of the entire civilization. To this end, humanity has directly installed two locks in their genes. One is an inhibition against aggressive impulses, and the other is known as the Kishiku mechanism, which is essentially like embedding morality into the genes. Whenever there is a thought of attacking their own kind, the body will issue a warning, such as an accelerated heartbeat and difficulty breathing. If the initiator of the attack does not cease, the body will shut down or even lead to death. Shun realized that this system was completely designed to prevent the emergence of Aki and yokai. However, what they did not know is that there still exist two bugs. The first is the uncontrolled power of an Aki, which inadvertently kills people, hence it does not trigger Kishiku. The second is the more terrifying yokai, who are individuals suffering from mental illness and are immune to the two genetic rules. Just as Minoshiro was about to inform the protagonists of this, it was suddenly engulfed in flames. Before dying, Minoshiro projected a vision of a mother holding her child. A bald man appeared who would not allow the children to listen to Minoshiro's nonsense. It turns out the monk was from Seijoji Temple, a place that can seal powers. Because the group violated the rules, the monk completely sealed the power of all 5 individuals and took them back to the temple for punishment. On the way, the group discussed the likelihood of being disposed of upon their return. At this time, Shun noticed something unusual about the monk. The vision projected by Minoshiro just before its death had triggered the monk's Kishiku. Although he did not actually kill anyone, the incident had severely affected the monk. Suddenly, there was an explosion in the deep forest, and a giant Bake Nazumi blocked their path. Instead of revering them as deities, the Bake Nazumi were now attacking them. In an instant, the monk incinerated the Bake Nazumi's weapons and seized it, only to find that it bore no mark on its head, indicating that these Bake Nazumi came from another place. He then mercilessly killed it. To intimidate the Bake Nazumi, the monk, despite severe pain, used his power to blast a path open. However, the end of the road was already blocked by a group of Bake Nazumi. Without hesitation, the monk began to gather power, and the Bake Nazumi were quickly annihilated. Suddenly, a balloon dog emerged from the body of a Bake Nazumi. The balloon dog's body rapidly expanded, and the monk, using all his strength, shielded the children. A massive explosion echoed through the woods, leaving a large crater filled with darts, which were actually the bones of the balloon dog. Everyone was stunned. Could there really be an animal that evolved just to kill? The monk was already dead. As the group prepared to leave, a large number of Bake Nazumi appeared. The group thought the Bake Nazumi would fear them, but instead, they launched an attack. The group scattered and fled. During the escape, Saki accidentally fell to the bottom of a valley. Just when she was in despair, Satoru appeared, bringing hope. But their hope was quickly dashed as they were surrounded by Bake Nazumi. Instead of killing them, the baked nazumi took the two back to their lair. After some thought, Satoru took out a fake nest snake egg and gave it to the guard, who swallowed it whole, causing an explosion in his stomach that killed him instantly. The two then began to flee, with the baked nazumi quickly in pursuit. Just as they were preparing for a desperate fight, a voice suddenly guided them to escape. Without thinking, they followed it, feeling lucky to encounter a speaking being at such a critical moment. They fell to the bottom of the valley again. It turned out that their savior was Squeala, the minister of the local duckneck, a tribe of insectivorous flies, responsible for the communication between baked nazumi and humans. Hence, he was very intelligent and eloquent. Squeala took them back to his tribe, where the queen had been waiting for them for a long time. The queen hid in the tent to welcome them, but Squeala accidentally set the tent on fire with a torch. The ugly queen was exposed in front of them in an instant. Furious and embarrassed, the queen was ready to bite Squeala to death. Saki made great efforts to dissuade her, saving Squeala's life. However, Squeala, ignoring his injuries, revealed that the attackers were from a foreign tribe of ground spiders. Their tribe was now in grave danger. He requested Saki and others to help their tribe. Satoru was thinking of making excuses to refuse, especially since their powers were sealed. But Saki became concerned. Squeala spoke softly. If they were defeated, they would become eternal slaves. The queen would be killed, and they would be drained and thrown into the back mountains as fertilizer. The two did not agree, but Squeala still respected their deities and hosted them. In the middle of the night, the guards at the door were attacked. The ground spider tribe had already launched an attack. The battle outside had begun. Hearing the noise, the two started to escape, but the confusing caves led them astray. They also encountered poison gas. The enemies caught up at the same time. Satoru threw a torch, instantly igniting the gas, causing a huge explosion that knocked them to the ground. Looking up at the sky full of stars, they thought they could leave, but realized that the light was actually emitted by fireflies. The fireflies poured down. Satoru protected Saki with his body. Fortunately, the ground fireflies only captured insects, harmless to humans. However, they were trapped inside, which also blocked the enemies. In despair, Saki suddenly remembered something: the school rule prohibiting sharing one's mantora with others. But Satoru had left his mantora in an imprint. Saki began to recite the sealing words, imposing a suggestion on Satoru. Then she told Satoru his own mantora. Unexpectedly, Satoru truly recovered his power. Regaining confidence, Satoru immediately used his power to blast the earth above and disperse the poison fog. After coming out, Saki thought about leaving quickly, but Satoru disagreed, arguing that running away would only lead to being pursued. The best method was to annihilate the enemy to eliminate future threats. With just a glance, the boulder in front of the young man was instantly split in half, and the next second it was divided into countless blocks, precisely smashing towards the enemy. The incoming barrage of arrows also stopped in midair, reversing direction towards the enemy. This is the power of those who possess power. Satoru and Saki were nearly killed by the baked nazumi of the ground spider tribe. This incited a strong desire for revenge in Satoru. Luckily, Saki had secretly noted down Satoru's mantora, successfully calling back his power. Thus occurred the scene at the beginning. Avoiding the enemy meant annihilating them. Then Satoru once again uprooted trees and controlled the trees to roam through the forest, taunting the baked nazumi. The baked nazumi took the bait as expected. Satoru then transformed into a demon, directly igniting the trees and smashing them onto the baked nazumi. In an instant, the baked nazumi were everywhere dead or injured. To continue deeper, Satoru controlled a huge rock to shield them. Soon they discovered the poison gas trap set by the ground spider tribe. Then with a tornado, he destroyed a parking lot, eliminating another wave. Satoru was still not satisfied, controlling the corpses of the baked nazumi. The baked nazumi were terrified. In a moment, the ground spider baked nazumi ambushing them were completely annihilated. Satoru wanted to continue deeper, but Saki was scared. She noticed that Satoru had changed. Just as the two were silent, Squeala appeared with his subordinates, pretending it was for their safety, deceiving their trust, leading them onto what they claimed was a safe path. In last night's battle, apart from the queen who was hidden away, all other baked nazumi were wiped out due to poisonous gas. Saki, vigilant, disguised themselves and another person as Bake Nazumi and proposed that two Bake Nazumi impersonate them. Sure enough, just a few steps later, their decoys were killed. The group dropped to the ground to avoid the enemy's poison arrows. Saki, with sharp eyes, spotted the enemy hiding in the trees. Satoru, with a single glance, shook the enemy out of the tree, causing their immediate death. Seeing the Bake Nazumi, which resembled stick insects, the two were momentarily stunned. Could they really change their shape at will? Later, they arrived at a pond where Saki, once again alert, sensed something unusual. The others, however, didn't think much of it. Just as they were about to leave, several frog monsters suddenly emerged from the pond, shooting poison arrows that swiftly dispatched several victims. Satoru let out an evil laugh and boiled the pond with his power. Yet, the real attack came from behind. Fortunately, Saki's timely warning allowed Satoru to control the boiling water in the pond, which dispatched the sneak-attacking mole creatures. Satoru was already beginning to tire, though he still talked tough. The enemy then launched a barrage of rocks, all of which Satoru managed to block, but his power was nearly depleted. Seeing the situation worsening, Squeala and his subordinates took off, abandoning the two. Taking advantage of the enemy reloading their ammunition, Saki spotted their scout. Satoru immediately set the scout on fire, causing the enemy to lose their vision and halt their attack. Squeala and his subordinates then returned. He continued to incite them to eliminate the enemy. Saki grew angry. Why were enemies everywhere on the safest path? Squeala continued to argue foolishly, and the two never realized they had been used. At this moment, the scout returned, indicating that there were no more enemies in the forest. Now they just needed to cross the forest to defeat the enemy's main force. Having come this far, the two felt compelled to see it through. After crossing the bamboo forest, they were stunned to see a gorge filled with tens of thousands of Bake Nazumi from the Earth Spider tribe. Satoru, weakened from excessive use of his power, was preparing to retreat when the enemy's catapults launched an attack. Unexpectedly, the minister once again ruthlessly abandoned them. In a moment of quick thinking, Saki had Satoru deflect the largest boulder to misdirect their attack. This tactic proved effective, and the two immediately fled. During their escape, they saw the captured minister, but they were also in no position to help themselves. Unexpectedly, the minister betrayed them. Satoru, struggling to summon his power, killed one creature, while another was slain by a small knife Squeala had concealed in his mouth. Squeala hurried over to thank them. The priority was to leave the area quickly, but Satoru, exhausted, could no longer move. However, the enemy suddenly withdrew at that moment. It turned out that the recent horn sound was made by a tribe called the Giant Hornets, the strongest in the Kanto region, boasting over 20,000 warriors. The tribe was led by Kiroumaru, a newcomer granted a name in kanji. He effortlessly wiped out the Earth Spider tribe and then showed divine respect to the two. What followed was the takeover of the Earth Spider tribe, the elimination of their queen, the seizure of their offspring, and the enslavement of all their progeny, doomed to never rise again. This was the most precious spoils of war. Some pleaded for the Earth Spider Queen's life, but Kiroumaru refused. With no other choice, the Earth Spider General had to atone with his death. He appeared with two balloon dogs. Satoru instinctively used his remaining power to protect Kiroumaru, causing both him and Saki to faint. They were then taken back to the Giant Hornets tribe. Naive Saki was still relieved that everyone had been saved, but Satoru believed they were still in danger. Although they are loyal to humans, they do not necessarily obey them because they listen to the adults, which means they prioritize the commands of the ethics committee. Moreover, they have learned the truth about the world through the false Minoshiro, so the adults will certainly not let them go. Since the Kishiku people cannot kill each other, but the Bake Nazumi are different. The adults can order the Bake Nazumi to eliminate them. Think about those children at the academy who disappeared without Satoru's awakening power. The adults probably already know about them through Kiroumaru. The two escaped overnight, and suddenly Squeala appeared, claiming to protect them, but was criticized by Satoru for not bringing troops, leaving Squeala speechless. But for now, they had no choice but to rely on this cunning fellow to escape. Squeala led them to the riverbank, but unfortunately, there were nighthawks used by Kiroumaru for surveillance in the sky. Everyone had to wait by the lake until dawn when they unexpectedly encountered their lost companions. There was no time to explain, and they immediately took a small boat to escape. Without power, their progress was slow. Suddenly, Nighthawks appeared in the sky, and Kiroumaru's warships appeared behind them. To everyone's surprise, Kiroumaru came to help them. When they parted, Kiroumaru made a strange request, asking everyone to keep the day's events a secret, or his life would be in danger, confirming Satoru's suspicion that Kiroumaru was indeed involved with the ethics committee. At night, Saki helped Shun regain his power. After returning to school, everyone secretly retrieved their powers. They thought they had deceived everyone, but the ethics committee was already aware of everything. He is the strongest man on the surface who could easily split the earth in half if he wished, yet at this moment, he was scared back a few steps by a student. The school then immediately ordered classes to be suspended for reorganization. This school is also quite remarkable. To take classes, one must be in a relationship, and moreover, the relationship must be with someone of the same sex. This was all ordered by the school's ethics committee. They made boys pair with boys and girls with girls. Based on their study of bonobo social rules where bonobos relieve stress through male-female mating when stressed. The school strictly restricted heterosexual love to control the birth of psychics, as no one knew when someone capable of destroying the world might emerge. But under all these rules, there was still someone who attempted to break them, our protagonist Saki, who had secretly loved Shun all along. After Saki finds out about Shun's intimacy with Satoru, Saki understands that all this, and the next day, Shun broke up with Satoru. Because Shun also loved Saki, but Satoru quickly found a new love and deliberately flaunted it in front of Shun, aggravating Shun, who already had no outlet for his stress. Thus began the scene at the beginning. Shisei, the strongest man on the surface, came to the school to inspect, hoping to select a talented child for cultivation. Everyone showed their true abilities hoping to be chosen by Shisei, but Shisei already had a target in mind, the genius Shun, whose ability allowed him to control life, such as making a chicken egg that normally takes 21 days to hatch, do so in just 2 hours under the influence of power. Shun was regarded as Shisei's successor, but when Shisei approached, he unexpectedly stepped back and left the classroom without a word. The teacher hurriedly followed him, and upon returning, immediately announced the suspension of classes. Unconsciously, Saki glanced towards Shun, but he revealed a terrifying expression, smashed an egg on the ground, and inside it was the eye of a demon. Everyone asked Shun what was wrong, but he only said he might be too tired. Because Saki liked Shun, she was eager to know what was wrong with him and blocked his path at a place he had to pass. Saki tried to approach, but Shun loudly stopped her, lowered his head, indicating he wanted to be alone. Seeing his beloved confused, Shun took out 3 training balls that, without the control of power, still orbited around him. Shun mentioned that he might not be physically ill and needed time for treatment, refusing Saki's request to visit him, as she would likely not be allowed to visit anyway. Watching the despondent Saki, Shun softened his heart. It turned out that their contact with the Minoshiro 2 years ago and their subsequent attack had already been exposed. Since then, the ethics committee had been secretly watching their every move. For some reason, the 5 of them had not vanished like other children. Shun warned Saki to be careful of the cat, then gave her a collar that matched his family's dog's collar. Both the dog and Saki were very important to Shun. After that day, Shun never returned to school. The main group of 4, despite the risk of being monitored, split into 2 groups to find Shun. Maria and Mamoru asked around the school, while Satoru and Saki went to Shun's hometown. But upon reaching the outskirts, they found the village surrounded by caution tape. They decided to avoid surveillance by moving through the forest. Mamoru and Maria at school also noticed something was off. None of the children from Shun's district had come to school. In the forest, Saki and Satoru were stopped by a barrier. After breaking in, they found Nazumi patrolling. As they delved deeper into the forest, it grew eerily strange with red trees bearing human-like faces and countless moth corpses on the ground, even with frost forming on the ground in midsummer. Everything was in chaos. Looking at their original village, it had turned into a large pit with 2 figures in the deep hole. Saki asked Satoru to create a mirror in the distance. As the mirror turned, Saki's head exploded with realization. The dark, withered tree in front of her was actually the beam of Shun's family mansion. She recognized it immediately from her childhood visits. On their way back, Saki was soul lost, wondering why the village had turned out that way and where her beloved boy had gone. At night, Saki tried to glean something from her parents. Her father just perfunctorily dealt with her, and when Saki tried to ask more, her mother sternly stopped her, her eyes brimming with tears, saying she didn't want to lose her. That night, Saki had a nightmare where she had a deceased sister she couldn't remember at all. Suddenly, a terrifying figure appeared at the window, almost scaring Saki out of her wits. Fortunately, it was Maria who appeared and hugged Saki, crying. It turned out that she and Mamoru had almost died. Maria and Mamoru had asked about Shun at school and learned that none of the kids from Shun's village had come to school. Then, thinking of what Shun had mentioned about the school courtyard, she used her levitation power to break into the courtyard. Inside, indeed, there were several strange storage jars. When they listened to them, they heard animal growls. Just then, the adults came in, including their teacher, talking about handling what was before the yokai. It turned out that the jars contained cat trick. Fortunately, she hid and avoided a disaster. The class teacher said it was a pity that the child was so talented. At that moment, Saki's pupils shook. She immediately packed her bags, started her boat, and quickly headed toward Shun's hometown. By then, someone had already taken Mamoru. After dodging the guards, Saki entered the forest alone. The fire elongated her shadow, making everything seem eerie. Suddenly, a cat trick appeared. With a roar swift as lightning, it bit into Saki's neck. It was then that Saki understood why Shun had given her a collar. She activated her power, and the cat trick turned to dust. The collar also fulfilled its purpose and shattered. After surviving the ordeal, Saki did not give up, but continued walking into the forest. Strangely, the entire forest was glowing, and the creatures were bizarrely mutated. Saki was almost lost to herself. Falling into a puddle, she heard a boy's whisper. The extremely intelligent boy only wanted to make friends, but had unknowingly accumulated deep karma. Why can't yokai live in the world? Why must I only be silent at the bottom of the lake? The girl murmured the boy's name. Shun's figure appeared on the trees. He did not want Saki to come close and controlled her from a distance, fearing his unconsciously leaked power would harm her. Knowing Saki had risked her life to see him, Shun finally appeared wearing a mask. He could only control his power for 10 minutes. During this time, he tried to explain everything. Shun took Saki to the last dilapidated house and tried to seal his power as much as possible into beads around his body. Shun said, "We've always been told that power is the manifestation of consciousness. That's why the school has established various rules to control it. But what people don't know is that power is always leaking, often unconsciously altering our surroundings. So, the barrier around the school isn't really to fend off enemies, but to confine those with power to prevent them from causing harm outside. For example, Minoshiro in ancient times were manatees, transformed into Minoshiro due to the influence of leaking power." As he finished speaking, Shun's dog appeared, now a monster due to Shun's power. Nevertheless, the dog remained Shun's good companion. Now completely transformed into a yokai, Shun had caused the destruction of his entire village, including his own parents. Tears streamed down Saki's face. Can't it be sealed? But what she could think of, the adults had already tried. Saki roared in despair, unable to do anything for her beloved. Just as she was preparing to part with her loved one, a cat trick broke in. Saki wanted to act, but was stopped by Shun, who now thought of death as a release. However, his dog appeared to protect him, even though it was no match for the cat trick. Unsurprisingly, the dog died. Already disheartened, Shun gave up. Even so, he remained gentle, blaming his indecision for the dog's death because the dog's constant presence had given him a will to live. The poison he drank had been altered by his unconscious power. Now with the dog gone, he had no more attachments. His power began to run wild. Shun used his last bit of consciousness to confess his love to Saki and protect her as she left. In an instant, the cabin turned into a demonic shape, and Shun disappeared.